You want to support Roland Martin Unfiltered? Be sure to join our Bring the Funk fan club. Every dollar that you give to us supports our daily digital show. There's only one daily digital show out here that keeps it black and keep it real as Roland Martin Unfiltered. Support the Roland Martin Unfiltered daily digital show by going to RolandMartinUnfiltered.com. You can make this possible. President Joe Biden announced today with a group of bipartisan senators an infrastructure deal that about $1 trillion, a far cry from what he initially asked. But the question is, will there actually be enough votes to get it passed? Here's what they had to say outside of the White House today.
We have to move, and we have to move fast. And this agreement signals to the world that we can function, deliver, and do significant things. These investments represent the kind of national effort that throughout our history has literally, not figuratively, literally transformed America and propelled us into the future.
Now, again, Democrats, Republicans coming together on this particular bill. The White House desperately wants an infrastructure bill, but is it really the kind of bill that we need? The initial bill calls for a number of different things in it. Republicans whine and complain about that particular bill, saying that, a lot of the stuff in it was not actually infrastructure. They wanted traditional infrastructure, but just roads and bridges and things along those lines. And so now Biden says he can trust these Republicans to actually go for it. But are the votes actually there? Now, some say they're not going to get about 20, 25 votes. So the question is, will Democrats go along with this compromise? Also, this bill is different from what happened in the House. So the issue that you now are dealing with is, are you going to see Democrats actually vote for this bill? Will you have enough Republicans who vote for it as well? Let's break this thing down. Amisha Cross, Democratic strategist. She joins me here in Chicago. Dr. Greg Carr, chair of the Department of Afro-American Studies at Howard University. He joins us as well, and will be joined a little bit later in the show by Reese Colbert of Black Women Views. Amisha, I'll start with you. So here's the whole deal. Biden wants a bill. They want an infrastructure bill. They want a win. But the question, though, is this is a far cry than what they asked for. Do you think Democrats are going to go for it? And can they actually sell this to the Democratic base?
This is a drastically different bill than what was originally proposed. With that being said, not only does it cut out the childcare services, but also aid to those who are seniors and living in senior care facilities, in addition to the community college and education funding. There's a lot here. And it also cuts out a lot of the funding that was initially planned for the infrastructure projects themselves that Republicans act like they like, roads, rail, and bridges. This is a far cry from what we initially saw. And I think that for Democrats right now looking towards the midterms and the ones who happen to be in purple districts and are afraid of their seats possibly flipping, they see a need to actually appease some Republicans. But to your point earlier, I don't think that they're going to get the Republican votes even with the current iteration of this bill. It is a really hard nut to crack. And at this point, I think the Democrats are just giving way too much for a bill now that is the bare bones of what it initially started as.
What you also are dealing with here, Greg Carr, is that the issue of how you pay for it. Republicans were insistent they were not going to raise the corporate tax to actually pay for it. Democrats said they were not going to support a tax on electric vehicles or increasing the gasoline tax. But here's the thing that folks don't want to deal with. This, you can have a Senate compromise all you want to. It also has to pass the House. Democrats only have a 3-vote majority in the House. If 4 or 5 progressives say no to this bill, it doesn't pass the House. So this is the moment where House progressives can play the role of Senator Joe Manchin and say, I'm not accepting this damn compromise that you broker with these United States senators. I'm not going to vote for it. There needs to be more in it for our constituents.
Perhaps theoretically play that role, Roland, for sure. But I think Amisha nailed this on the head. This is about the 2022 midterms. The only bit of news made today in that little political theater in the driveway outside the White House was that Joe Biden said, I'm not signing anything that isn't accompanied by that big budget reconciliation package that puts back a great deal of what Amisha just outlined. And we all can count. Mitt Romney's standing over there, a little feckless self, and you got those other ones, the guy Kennedy from Louisiana. But we can all count. 10 is not 5. They are not going to vote for anything. I think what the Democrats are doing is showing once more that they are willing to compromise. And when the Republicans, as they will do, inevitably will do, reject this bill, if it was $1, they'd reject it. Then they go and move toward budget reconciliation. But I think it's all kabuki theater for the midterm elections to try to not lose their seats by saying we did everything we could. These people are against everything.
Amisha, look, this is real simple. You've got 59 members of the Congressional Black Caucus. You've got other House progressives. They can torpedo this bill, which will force Democrats to have to depend on Republican votes. I'm not sure if the Republican Party will go for the infrastructure bill because they want to see Biden. They don't want to see him get a win. So again, this to me is where if you are House progressives, this is where you say, no, what y'all passed unacceptable. We're going to pass a different bill to then force it back to the Senate to see what they're going to do.
And I think that you laid it out exactly how it's going to happen. House progressives are in no way going to support this bill. We're going to watch them push for a beefing up of the original bill, but we're also going to see them say no because, one, they know that the Republican votes just aren't going to be there, even with the current iteration of the bill. But they also have an understanding that the American public supported 68%. That's Republicans and Democrats of the original infrastructure package. So this isn't an issue of left or right when you talk about actual voters themselves. This is Republicans, congressional Republicans, Senate Republicans deciding that they're going to dig their heels in the sand and say no matter what Biden actually presents before them. This is going to have to go through the reconciliation process. And knowing that that's going to be the next stage, to be honest, it's time for Biden to go big or go home.
It also is a question, Greg, again, of how serious do you want to play ball? How serious do Democrats want to challenge Republicans and their orthodoxy? Their whole deal is, no, we're not going to increase taxes at all, the corporate tax rate. Okay, how in the hell are you going to pay for it? How are you going to pay for this $1 trillion plan here? And so there needs to be some type of corporate tax, wealth tax. Republicans don't want to go for it. And so, again, the White House, and then you hear Biden who keeps saying he trusts their word. I'm sitting there going, I don't know what the hell the optimism is in trusting them because you damn sure couldn't trust them to support a January 6th commission. You damn sure couldn't support that because couldn't trust them when it came to a voter suppression bill or a new voter bill.
Well, again, Roland, is theater. Biden said today he is not going to sign any compromise bill that could pass without it being connected to that larger package that's coming through budget reconciliation that will only have Democratic votes. I think that's where that's where Pelosi's going to go to the progressives and say, look, we're not sending this quote unquote compromise legislation back over to the Senate the way it is without saying, and you are taking the budget reconciliation bill. They're playing high-stakes poker, at least as high as you can, in a country where people are so damn stupid. They're either the white nationalist party, who are voting against their interests. There are $312 billion in this compromise bill. Lauren Boebert is not going to vote for it in the House of Representatives, even though her district, which includes Aurora in Colorado, has one of only 3 factories in the country that produce steel rail. She can put her whole damn district back to work, and she's going to vote against it, and them hillbillies are still going to vote for her. So what I'm saying is that this, the progressives don't need to stuff it into this compromise piece. They just need to make sure that that tethered budget reconciliation bill comes to the president's desk as well. And that's where it's going to die in the Senate anyway, because like Amisha said, the Republicans aren't going to sign anything. And in terms of cutting taxes, there's $40 billion in this compromise bill to beef up the IRS. And they say it will generate $100 billion in revenue. Well, guess who's going to pay those added taxes? It ain't going to be Zuckerberg. It ain't going to be Jeff Bezos. It's going to be the working class and middle class people in this country who the IRS are going to go after. They're all playing a ridiculous game. But ultimately, I think this is all about trying to expose the white nationalist party for what they are. And again, the Democrats just seem to be playing this game, the strategic game, trying with an eye toward the 2022 elections.
Well, and I think, Amisha, this is also where they have to decide whether they are going to stand up, whether they are going to flex their muscle. It seems to me that consistently, when we talk about these bills, it is acquiescing to the needs and desires of the Republican Party. And part of the thing that Democratic voters want to see, they want to see a fight. They actually want to see that you give a damn enough to fight for the issues and the principles that are desired. That's what they also want to see. Granted, I totally understand the desire, hey, getting a win, but people also want to know that you're going to fight to the end to get your priorities.
You're right, and most people don't understand the mechanics of what goes on behind the scenes in these congressional conversations. But I think that there is a huge fervor among the American public to see Democrats with their hands in the ring, and they feel like Democrats are giving way too many concessions. They feel like you won in 2020 and somehow are screwing the pooch come 2021, and in 2022 you're going to lose seats anyway. And if there isn't anything that's pushed that is large scale, that is an overhaul, it is going to be really tough to get those same Democratic voters who came out in large number in 2020 to show up again in 2022. And I think that because we're seeing this infrastructure bill basically get ripped apart, because we haven't seen the significant movement on police reform that people voted for, because there are still issues with housing equity, because there are still issues with economic development and all of these things across the Black community, there is a fervor to see the Biden administration do more, to basically steamroll Republicans at this point, to do whatever you have to do to get this package across the aisle, because there's a frustration amongst voters that once Democrats get in, it is that they are giving too much to Republicans, listening too much to this group that is never going to support any of their policies, but also trying to make as many concessions as possible in order to win elections, when right now we're watching Republicans basically fight to redraw lines, fight to actually upend a lot of our electoral system in general, in addition to removing polling places, cutting voter rolls. There is nothing Democrats can do right now in terms of trying to give a carrot that will actually bring Republicans on board.
You know, one of the things that I think we also have to demand here, Greg, and I was having a conversation earlier with a longtime official here in Chicago, and that is who's going to benefit from this $1.2 trillion if it does indeed pass? Will these trade unions be forced to open their doors? I remember in the first term of President Barack Obama, Gene Sperling came on my show, Washington Watch, and I hit him with that question. I hit him with the question of you guys wanting Black support for the infrastructure bill, but these trade unions have been blocking Black people from these jobs for a very long time. So who the hell is going to benefit? You know, are these dollars going to come to our community? Are we going to see dollars going to Black-owned construction companies? Are we going to see architecture jobs, engineering jobs going to Black-owned companies as well? See, this is one of the things that also has to be discussed. Sure, you want us to get excited about $1.2 trillion, but how will Black-owned businesses benefit from the $1.2 trillion? The White House better have an answer.
Well, certainly, there needs to be direction given by the federal government. But as we have seen with the Biden administration, with Biden's announcement this week on releasing funds that have already been encumbered to give to law enforcement in this country, they can either hire more police, or they can use it to create programming, including programming for young people and intervention programming. A lot of this decision making is going to be driven by the state and local governments. So right there in Chicago, of course, and we're going to hear that today, talking about violence, the impact of public policy decision makers at the local level on the lives of our people. That means that those unions are going to have to get in and press the mayor, press the city council. They're going to have to make sure their elected representatives do what they need to do, because when that money comes out of Washington, D.C., a lot of it is going to be unrestricted. Well, the restrictions are they won't be so tight as to prevent the local decision makers from doing exactly what you just said. I mean, $47 billion in the compromise bill that's never going to be voted on favorably is about resilience. What does that mean? That's clean energy. Are those jobs going to go to Black businesses? Are they going to go to Black people? A lot of that is going to have to do with local decision makers. Are they going to let those contracts? If $65 billion is about broadband in this compromise bill, compromise bill, then what's going to happen at the state and local level to make sure that the people who are out there extending access are the local decision makers that have pressure brought to bear on them by local people? Organization is incredibly important. That's why you've been traveling around the country, brother. It's got to be done at the local level, too.
This is Speaker Nancy Pelosi today addressing the issue of the infrastructure bill. Are you getting sound? Are you getting sound?
Just say that I associate myself with what.
All right, folks. So we're going to try to get that sound issue out there in a second to hear from Speaker Nancy Pelosi. So look, at the end of the day here,
What we have to do more in terms of.
the White House wants this
So
bill.
let me be really clear on this.
They want, look, who ratings above 60%. They want to remain that way. They want to actually have the win here. But they still are going to have to contend with, first of all, are you going to actually have the votes there? You also have the possibilities this here. Democrats can filibuster it. Now, I'm sure Biden does not want to be embarrassed by his own party. He would tell Chuck Schumer, don't actually do it. But again, this is one of those moments where if you are a progressive United States senator, you can say, I'm not supporting this. Okay? It was $3 trillion initial plan. You guys whacked it down to 1.2. Okay, the hell with that. Add some more stuff to it. I think that's the jockey you're going to actually see take place.
100%. And we have to remember who actually pretty much created the standard points for the original infrastructure bill. It was those progressives. It was those progressives who had gone around during the last election cycle in 2020, talked to the people in their communities, talked to the people on the ground, what they needed, what they saw, and the things that would help to get their states and their communities back on track. Biden's deal with progressives was largely to deliver an infrastructure package that spoke to the needs of an ever-changing society, specifically as it relates to a lot of the environmental awareness issues and the rise of storms and things like that. But in addition to that, to speak to the everyday ails of communities, particularly communities of color across the country, where you have people who live in multi-generational households. They're working 2 and 3 jobs, but they're also taking care of grandma. They're also taking care of disabled relatives. This was an infrastructure bill originally designed to meet the needs of a society today that includes more women working than we've ever seen historically in this country, but childcare at exponentially high prices that doesn't meet the needs of those who actually need that level of assistance. So I think that what we're watching right now is progressives who also stand for re-election, who have to ensure that the things that they wanted, the things that they fought for, the things that they bargained with Biden to actually get in the infrastructure package actually make it to the finish line.
And that point there, Reese Colbert, that people have to understand. Democrats, slim majority in the U.S. House. And so you can't bend over too much to satisfy Republicans. Otherwise, you're going to piss off your base. And look, they have no margin for error. Republicans are going to try to gerrymander their way into the majority in Texas and Florida and other states as well. And so the issue is now going to see what happens if it gets through the Senate, what then happens in the House.
Yeah, I mean, but I guess I'm going to have my unpopular opinion here and say I am on board with taking a win. I don't understand why every single bill has to be this massive, all-encompassing, all-sweeping, like $3-4 trillion bill. I don't see the problem with taking a win on where there's areas of bipartisan agreement and then handling everything else in reconciliation. If they don't get the votes, they gave it the good old college try. And you go back to the original game plan. But I don't see, I think what Democrats suffer from is purity tests that result in no results. And you don't get rewarded at the booth for purity. You just don't. Republicans do, because Republican voters are all spun up about white supremacy and abortion rights and gay rights. But Democratic voters actually want results. And so that is what they have to deliver here. And so I'm all for, I don't know all of the specific details of the bill. I'm sure there's something that each side can quibble with. But if you can actually get something through, and that's a big if you can get something through with bipartisan support, that gives everybody a win in this situation, and particularly the Democrats need a win. The Republicans can go in 2020 with critical race theory and gerrymandering and voter suppression and turn off their base. Democrats have to produce something. And I think if Democrats can ever manage to message things appropriately and actually get something accomplished, then this situation can be a win for them. And then in the reconciliation part, then you deal with the stickier issues that you know for a fact are not going to get any results. But the Democrats cannot keep coming to the table and say, oh, well, Mitch McConnell blocked it. Oh, well, the Republicans blocked it. They have to deliver. And I don't think that they should wait all the way until the time you have a reconciliation bill to actually do that. Get as much done in these bills. Start piecemealing some of these things where there is some degree of bipartisan consensus. There might only be 10 people that are willing to support it, but start getting some of these things through Congress so that you can get some wins on the table. It's not going to be pure. It's not going to make everybody happy.
Only issue there.
Oh, go ahead.
But Rishi, the only issue there is I get the whole point with a win, but there are some things that are actually not wins. I mean, it might appear to be a win. It might appear to look just like when Congressman Jim Clyburn talked about I prefer a half loaf versus a full loaf. Yeah, but the other deal is here. There's no guarantee you're going to pass something down the road. And so part of the job of Democrats is to push as aggressively as possible. And we've seen all the differences between the House and the Senate. This is a perfect example. This is a Senate negotiated deal. Well, guess what? They don't run both chambers. And so Democrats in the House can pass a completely different bill. Now that forces them to go to committee, and that's what I am saying. This is not a win. This is only if it passes the Senate. The House can sit here and say, damn your 1.2, we're going to pass a $2 trillion infrastructure plan. And now you've got the House version, you've got the Senate version. Now those committees, now they come together to hash that out. What I'm arguing is that House Democrats should not accept this, whatever this is, and do their job the same way the Senate doesn't always accept what the House sends over.
I understand that, but that's been tried and tried and tried over and over again. That's why we don't have anti-lynching legislation. If the House had passed the Justice for Lynching Victims Act,
The only reason, here's the deal. The only reason we don't have the anti-lynching bill is because they wanted to pass it by unanimous consent, and Senator Rand Paul objected. Now, this is what I don't understand. What I don't understand is why Senator Chuck Schumer doesn't put it on the floor. Damn unanimous consent. Why can't you pass it outright and force folks on the record? And so maybe that's the whole issue. But the only reason we don't have an anti-lynching bill is because one guy, Senator Rand Paul from Kentucky, stood up and objected to unanimous consent. They can actually pass an anti-lynching bill, but they want to do it only by unanimous consent. To me, that's just dumb.
But there are two reasons why. Number one, because Rand Paul filibustered the House bill, but also because the House passed their own bill versus the one that passed by unanimous consent in the Senate. So that's their prerogative to do. That is certainly their prerogative to do. The House can pass whatever they do. They are a co-equal branch. They're equal to the Senate. But what I'm saying is if you can get the votes, and I don't know if they're going to get the votes. We all are skeptical that they're going to get the votes. But I'm saying under the circumstances that you actually can get the votes on a bipartisan measure on things that there are areas of bipartisan agreement, take it. And then on the other end, you get everything else you can get under reconciliation. I don't personally see a problem with that because at the end of the day, trying to push everything in reconciliation, you have to deal with the Joe Manchins and the Kyrsten Sinemas who are going to negotiate against the Democratic caucus. So the things that you don't have to negotiate down within your own caucus, get that stuff done on a bipartisan basis. And then that way, when it comes to reconciliation, as Joe Manchin has even said, now I don't trust him, but he's even said he's willing to deal with some of those things like, for instance, childcare and different kinds of cares on that end. That's what I think. I just don't think that it's wise for the Democrats to consistently show up with no results because they go by these purity tests and they don't get anything passed on both chambers.
Amisha, then Greg.
Well, the issue here, I think, is that at the end of the day, we're going to see, it's not just Joe Manchin and Kyrsten Sinema, specifically on this as well. There are so many people who have been shielded, basically, Democrats who've been shielded by Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin basically taking the fire out front, who also do not support this. So I think at the end of the day, we have to be very strategic as Democrats, but also have to have a very strong understanding of what is being faced by some of these members. And I think that it's going to have a very uphill battle because you have Democrats who are more than willing to tank this because they are not willing to make those concessions. They don't believe, and I'm with them on this, I don't believe that parsing this out into a separate bill or looking to have some of those what is seen as social infrastructure being a standalone bill is actually going to pass. It's not going to pass in this Congress, and looking at what is probably going to happen in 2022 in terms of the House flipping Republican and the Senate being up for grabs as well, it darn sure isn't going to make it past that. So Democrats are up against a clock right now. They're up against a clock, they're up against a calendar, and they're making concessions, and it looks like this is going to deal them another big loss.
Greg?
Very quickly. Joe Biden said today he's not going to sign any compromise legislation that gets to his desk without the budget reconciliation bill. That's number one. That means that with that lying Susan Collins and Kennedy and Utah's Mitt Romney out there in the driveway, there were only two people at that microphone, Kyrsten Sinema and Joe Manchin. Why? Because they have already said they're not going to break the filibuster. So guess what? We all know that the white nationalist party is not going to vote for anything, including whatever these 5 Republicans said they agreed to. We know that. However, Joe Manchin, who 2 days ago said he was open to the idea of human infrastructure projects, as Biden has talked about them, meaning open to the budget reconciliation route, their whole pitch now is to get those two, which means holding the other ones in line, including the progressives on the House and the Senate side, in that process to go ahead and vote on the reconciliation bill because that other one is dead. Mitch McConnell is never going to allow 5 more Republicans to join those other 5. It was political theater. I don't even think this was about a compromise bill. This is about forcing Manchin and Sinema to vote on the damn budget reconciliation bill. That's the best hope the Republicans has, because as we've just heard, as both Reese and Amisha have said, this thing is over for the Democratic Party if they don't do it in the next few months. The White Nationalist Party is getting ready to destroy the infrastructure of the federal government. That's what they're doing at the state house level with voter suppression. They're going to wreck the country. I don't give a damn because, hey, that might be the way it has to go. But let's be very clear about the fact that the Democrats don't have a play. This whole thing is hanging on 2 senators. And I believe today was just one more step closer to the process of getting them to 51 with the vice president to get the reconciliation bill through, because the Republicans ain't never going to vote on nothing that they claim to be negotiating for.
Folks, back to that Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Racial injustice is a scourge on this nation, and the Black community has felt it for generations. We have an obligation to do something about it. Whether it's canceling student debt, increasing the minimum wage, or investing in Black-owned businesses, the Black community deserves so much better. I'm Nina Turner, and I'm running for Congress to do something about it.